Salutations and welcome back to Do Chat Day. This is part 2 of a 3-part series just discussing the game right now. We're going to be starting a new key giveaway in this video, which will be in the comments, so just comment down below, and then in the next video, the winners of that raffle will be announced. But anyway, today we're going to be talking about the meta of Catalyst Black. And we're gonna be talking about some really good builds right now. So yeah, let's just jump into those subjects. Again, I have my boy Colton here.
Hello.
This is big, also known as Big Brain Boy. And yeah, we're gonna go back and forth talking about these subjects. So I guess we'll just, without further ado, we'll just jump into the first subject. So I'll ask the question here. So Colton, what are the best items right now, do you think?
The best items in the game.
Yes.
There's a lot of good items.
Yeah.
I'm going to start off with maybe not the best item, but an item I think is very solid and is, I think, really good if you're just starting out and works really well in a lot of builds. And that's going to be Splintered Fate.
Probably. I do have one note about the Splintered Fate.
What?
It is probably... I think it is pretty hard to use, the Splintered Fate.
I don't think so. I think it's super easy. I think it's one of the best items for new players to pick up and use, and I think it's a really solid item overall. Even if it's not the best on some optimal builds, I think it's really, really good. I think it's really easy to use. I just think it's all around really good. You don't have to worry too much about very much while using it. What's an item you think is very strong?
I agree. Just a primary weapon?
Yeah, sure. Let's give another primary.
A primary weapon that I think is probably really solid, and it's a starting weapon that you start out with, is probably the Sincerity. It doesn't give health, it only gives move speed in its stats, but its infusion perk is really good if you can get its infusion perk, which is this weapon deals 15% increased damage for 5 seconds after using a healing ability, and that's level 1, so you just need 1 duplicate to get that. And I'm pretty sure the starting build is the Sincerity, and you also have Catalytic Heal, which is another really strong item. And I think you can just make really solid support and even combat builds with the Sincerity. And it does good damage, and with its infusion perk, it does great damage.
What's another weapon that you think is really strong?
Really strong?
Not a starting weapon.
Not a starting weapon. Well, I was picking that specifically because for early players, you can just do that. If you get a Sincerity duplicate, you already have a healing ability.
That's true.
But,
that's a good point.
I think probably most people like the Caretaker over the Borson.
I think both are really good.
I think both are really good, but I think the Borson is probably really strong.
The Borson is good in a lot of all around, either you like supportive builds or like tanky builds, where you're not necessarily gonna be I think it's good in a lot of all around builds where you're tanking for your team and sort of being on the front line. And I think the Caretaker is really, really good for builds where you're actually diving in and trying to take out enemies, especially because of its infusion perk. But I think they're both super duper strong.
Which the infusion perk for the Caretaker, after you use a movement ability, the damage gets increased.
Yeah,
so obviously you can see
you can use Blink Strike or Temporal Rush.
Any movement
dive
ability
onto enemies.
Yeah, and you get a damage increase.
The Leap Strike. There are a lot of. So what are some good abilities?
Some good abilities. Well, we just mentioned Temporal Rush. I think is probably.
You think it's the strongest movement ability?
I think Temporal Rush is the strongest. I think it's actually neck and neck between Temporal Rush and Blink. The only reason I think Temporal Rush is stronger is because it's Assassin Banner. So if you're going in, you have that damage bonus. I think Blink is probably overall better, but Temporal Rush is much better for quick skirmishes. It comes back faster, I think, and it does damage, obviously.
So you think Temporal Rush is a very strong ability. What's another really good ability?
Catalytic Heal. Catalytic Heal is just very strong.
I agree. Catalytic Heal and Catalytic Renewal are kind of interchangeable depending on the build you're going to use. I think they're pretty even, though I actually prefer Catalytic Heal. Heal, but they're both really good.
After you get the infusion perk on both of them, the healing just becomes insane. And even before you get the infusion
they're really potent healing. So both are really good. That's really straightforward. There's not a whole lot to say. They're huge for you and supporting your team. I think Power Infusion is a really strong ability. It's going to be more build specific.
Yeah, I think it's more specific.
But there are a couple items where it synergizes really well with and is super potent. There are also a bunch of items it's useless with. So Power Infusion, I think, is great with the Rush. I think it's great with, which is the primary rocket launcher, the common rocket launcher. I think it's really good with the cutaffusion constant.
Versus dual pistols.
Primary dual pistols. I think it's, there are a couple items you can use it with, but I think those are the two that it's really strong with. And it's really the only ability that's going to increase your damage output on your primary, besides Onslaught Totem. So it's really good. I think Onslaught Totem is a little underrated, but not a super strong item, I agree. Okay. So
I have one more ability that I want to quickly mention.
Yep.
Is Frost Bomb.
Frost Bomb is pretty good. I think
Frost Bomb, it is Ranger, so it's harder to, you don't really get a whole sort of value from it. But I think for sniper builds, for a lot of builds, I think Frost Bomb is just a very strong ability, and it does a good amount of damage.
They removed
Grounding Bolt.
Grounding Bolt, which used to be another slowing ability.
Picture Primal Fire, but it does slowing.
And then Frost Nova is the only other kind of similar ability, and I agree that Frost Bomb is better in terms of you can get the slow onto somebody from far away,
and then you can hit them,
and then you can follow up with a sniper shot or something like that. So I agree, it's a pretty strong ability. I don't think it's amazing. I think it's not. I don't think it's, in my opinion, it's not super good, but I agree it's a solid ability. Okay, so what about trinkets? What are some really good trinkets? I think there are a lot of very useful.
There are a lot of really useful trinkets. So I think to start off, probably the one that people like the most is the Vanguard Clemency Vial, which what that does. So after you go below 35% health, you become invincible
for almost a second.
For almost a second, and that goes up with level. This resets if you get a kill. So
otherwise it has an insanely long cooldown.
Otherwise it has an insanely long cooldown if you don't get a kill. But after you get a kill, this comes back. So if you heal above 35% health and then go back down, you'll get it back. So if you're using like a Vanguard Assassin build, you can just kind of like keep getting it over and over again.
Wait, why does it come back upon going above 35% health?
What? Because you can't re-trigger it if you're below 30%.
Oh, but you still have to get a kill, yeah.
You still have to get a kill, but if you get a kill in the time that you're invincible and you also heal back up to 35% health.
Well, of course, yeah. That makes sense.
Then yeah.
It's not like a weird...
No, it's not a weird thing, but I'm explaining why it's good.
Yeah.
It's a very solid, and even if it's just a solid passive.
Because a good all-around passive, it makes you much tankier, and it's good for squishy builds to prevent them from getting burst down quickly.
Yeah.
What's another really good passive?
Probably the Bracer of Dedication is really strong in even non-sniper builds. So what the Bracer of Dedication does is it increases the amount of damage you deal from all sources by, except your primal.
By about 7%.
By about 7%, up to 5 stacks every time you get a kill. Permanently. This effect is permanent until you die. So if you have 5 stacks, you're dealing like 35% more damage permanently until you die. Which is a lot. And also with the sniper, it's sniper banner. So if you're using a long range build,
they can give you a couple percent more damage.
Yeah,
I agree. I think it's the best sort of. There are 3 passives that grant damage, and I think it's probably the best one of the 3. And I think they're all pretty solid. But there's Bracer of Dedication, which does what we've described already. There's Nihilium Guard, which gives you increased damage after defeating an enemy hero, but it lasts a certain period of time. And
it's also 25%, whereas max Bracer of Dedication.
In my opinion, Nihilium Guard's a pretty equally good to Bracer of Dedication.
Probably, yeah.
Because it gives you a slightly lower max damage bonus, but you get it after a single kill. And it lasts for about 20 seconds. So I think Nihilium Guard is really strong as well. And then the other damage increasing passive is Ryland's Grace, which is while you're in a bush, you deal increased damage to enemies outside of a bush. Again, it's about 25%. And in my opinion, this is probably the weakest damage dealing or damage increasing passive, because you have to both be in a bush, hitting an enemy outside of a bush, which is pretty limiting, so it won't always really help you. But it is still possibly useful.
Mainly, it's very hard to use in Eventide.
Yeah,
mainly
there's not enough bushes. In Slayer, you can utilize it, but in my opinion, it's not quite worth it, and I don't think it's that great. So, Clemency Vial is going to be one of the best protective passives. Bracer of Dedication is going to give you, I think, probably the best damaging passive, maybe tied with Nihilium Guard. What are some other good passives?
Probably, I'd say Exhortation Talisman. Very strong. What Exhortation Talisman do is when you hit someone... when you damage anyone, yeah. Yeah, when you damage anyone, they deal 30% less damage and are also revealed, which isn't really a big thing, but they're revealed for 4 seconds. So you can mark a bunch of people for your team and then basically your enemy's just going to be dealing 30% less damage. And I've even used it with shotgun builds, where you like jump on people.
It's a pretty straightforward support passive that gives you huge value to your team, and even in 1v1s is pretty good, because it's going to basically, if you're just 1v1ing someone, give you 30% more health because they're dealing 30% less damage. So the Exudation Talisman, I think, is super strong, potent support passive. Definitely the best supportive passive. Okay.
Last but not least, I think the Protector passive, the Belt of Phasing, I think is just very strong because it gives the most health just passively.
Yeah, so
and
every trinket gives a certain amount of max health.
Every trinket and ability.
And Belt of Phasing gives the highest amount in the entire game.
Yeah, right now. And it also, its ability...
Actually, Evasion Loop gives more, take it back.
What?
No.
Wait, what? Your Evasion Loop
is lower level.
Oh.
Yeah, Evasion Loop grants more, but both grant a large amount. But I think Belt of Phasing is a pretty potent...
But Evasion Loop just gives you an extra dodge.
Yeah.
Belt of Phasing gives you a pretty sizable shield when you dodge, when you roll. So if you roll in at someone, or you're trying to roll away, it saved my life a couple times where I'm like low health, and I like roll away, and I instantly get just like a pretty sizable shield that like tanks a couple bullets. I think overall, it definitely gives the most health in the game if you take into account the shields that it gives you.
Yeah, it's definitely, in terms of being like a tank, it's probably the most useful item. And it's another starting item, so everyone's going to have it. It's a pretty solid one. All right, let's talk about primals and some of the primal builds.
We didn't even talk about heavies.
We can talk about heavy weapons, okay. So what are the
real quick,
what are the best heavy weapons?
We have been recording for a lot. I think the Heretic very strong for in team fights and stuff.
So there's quite a few different AoE weapons. There's the Arrivals. There's the MK4 Accelerator, and there's the Demoloon, and I think
there's also the
Hailstorm's
Avalanche.
A little different, and there's the Avalanche. I think of those items, when you're looking at in terms of just dealing a large amount of damage in an area, the Heretic is the most potent. It has a huge blast radius and deals huge damage. It's not really that complicated. I think it's the strongest of those types of items. The Arrivals can be okay. There's the Luma Arrival and the normal Arrival. The Demoloon can be okay. The Avalanche, I think, feels pretty weak. But the Hailstorm is not quite the same type of thing. But yeah, in terms of dealing AoE damage in a team fight, the Heretic, I think, is the strongest. And overall, one of the strongest heavy weapons. What's another really strong heavy weapon, you think?
I think the Op Mandrill with its infusion, or even without its infusion perk, but with its infusion perk, which when you get a last hit, when you kill someone with the Op Mandrill, it basically brings back your ability. It gives you like 12 seconds on your ability charge.
So the Op Mandrill is a very potent heavy shotgun, which is strong on its own, and it has a very strong infusion perk that can synergize with different builds to allow you to get your ability off over and over again after getting a kill.
And then, I think another strong one, which you can talk about more, is the Findlay.
I think the Findlay is good. I don't think it's insane, but
its infusion perk is
I think
strong.
The Findlay is really underrated and a really strong heavy weapon. But I agree, it's not one of the best in the game. I'm not going to talk too much about it.
I think I'll quickly go over the Dispatch. I think the Dispatch is very good.
The Dispatch all around is one of the strongest heavy weapons of the game because it's so flexible. Okay, so let's talk about primals. What are the best primals?
I think, my hot take, I think Torden is probably one of the strongest primals right now.
I don't think that's a super hot take.
No, it's not a super hot take, but I think Torden is super strong because he's the only primal who can really legitimately support his team in a team fight through his massive shield.
Torden has quite a few going for him. He has the most health of any primal. He has the highest like single attack damage of any primal. So you can it's a large AoE, so he's great at you can surprise an enemy by turning primal on top of them and stomping them. In like a 1v1 setting, and then in a team fight, he has insane damage.
You can push enemies just.
He has a good AoE.
By walking at them.
And then he has, I think, one of the strongest primal abilities in the game, which is the barrier he can grant to his team, which is ridiculously large. I think that is the stronger ability compared to the lightning, for sure. The lightning.
And he also has his shielding passive, and his infusion perk grants a small amount of shield.
Yeah, though I wouldn't use the shielding passive. I would use the
Smite is probably
better.
Smite
is definitely better, I think.
But no, I don't think it's definitely better because with the shielding passive, the shielding passive is very strong because it grants shield constantly over time to you and your
teammates. Well, either way, Torden has two useful passives, which definitely can't be said about the other primals. I think overall he's the strongest. I think, in my opinion, the second strongest primal is Jenks.
I agree. He can get burst down really quickly, but he has the capacity to just stay alive from his healing passive. Which is,
if you play Jenks, you definitely have to play correctly.
yeah,
I think
Jenks
both
is
his
very
abilities are pretty useful. I think he's one of the hardest primals to use. But used correctly, I think he can be really good. I think the honorable mention would be Sunder, because he's much he charges up much faster than the other primals.
And again, I think
he's still very powerful. I think Sunder has the ability in a 1v1 to kill other primals almost entirely, but then he charges up much quicker than them by almost 80 seconds. So I think Sunder, if you want to be primaling frequently, in my opinion, he's the strongest. He's another very strong primal. And in shorter game modes, where you might even not be able to get your Torden charged up, I think Sunder is the strongest. What are the worst items in the game?
I'm just going through, probably, what are they called? The mortars? The primary mortars are very, I don't know.
It's pretty simple. The primary mortars, I don't think, have enough damage to really contribute to the fight. Even if they can give you like a positional advantage in terms of being over walls, it's not worth the fact that you just deal almost no damage. And if the enemy has any type of healing, they just counter it entirely, and you aren't doing anything. So it's that simple. There's not really much more to say about it.
I think ARs broadly are pretty
So that would
bad.
be the Lost Streamer.
And the Northern Warmth.
And the Northern Warmth. The issue is you're slowed significantly while shooting them. So to me, they're worse chain guns because they don't give any health or move speed. You're slowed significantly while using them. There's really almost no benefit to them over chain guns besides that you can start firing right away. But I think that's outweighed by the chain gun's massive health increase of 35%. So there's in my view, there's almost no point using them.
The flamethrower is probably down there.
I think the flamethrower is very weak. I think I've messed around with it. I think it's definitely one of the worst items in the game. So yeah, that's primaries.
That's
those are probably the
three.
Those are the primaries I don't think are really worth using at all. So yeah. What about heavy weapons? I know we disagree on this. I think the Trine Plane is almost useless. I think it's definitely. I think you never use it in comparison to the Op Mandrill. I hate the Trine Plane. I think it's terrible.
I think the Trine Plane is very useful because it has a massive max charges, which is 10. That's without any infusion perk. Just as 10 max charges. It doesn't shoot very fast, but if you're using, I don't know. It's just a great backup weapon.
So let's move on to a less controversial pick. I think Mutiny Song are pretty terrible. The dual pistols, assassin dual pistols that are heavy weapon, I think are pretty terrible. I think there's really no case for using them. I've messed with them. They're fine and they're okay, but there's almost no case for using them over anything else when you compare them to almost any other heavy weapon. I really don't think they work very well.
The Avalanche is probably one of the worst ones because its range
range is very poor.
Yeah, its range is very poor.
It doesn't hit in a large area.
Damage isn't great.
Yeah.
It's just...
It only has 3 charges. Yeah, I think it's pretty poor.
It's not even really good when fighting primals either, which it's primal.
Yeah, I think those are all the really, truly useless heavy weapons. Let's talk about abilities. As far as worst items go, I think Stasis is pretty terrible. I don't think it's worth using almost at all. From what I've seen, maybe I could be wrong, but I don't think Stasis is good at all.
Probably healing.
I think Volatile Mines are very funny, but I think if you're trying to actually win, I think they're some of the worst items outside of maybe Slayer.
Yeah, in like Eventide.
Yeah,
maybe Hydra. Actually, they could have
be okay.
Potential in Hydra.
Maybe underrated, but I think they're not particularly strong.
Healing Totem.
I think Healing Totem is pretty terrible now. It used to be amazing. Rip Healing Totem.
Compared to other healing abilities, it's very negligible.
It's almost nothing. You barely even notice it. Okay.
That's basically all the...
Those are some of the... the rest of the abilities I think are pretty usable. I think those are definitely the worst abilities. And then let's talk trinkets.
The worst trinket, I think, objectively, is Kindred's Clasp. Which, what that does is it grants you increased movement speed and increased healing. And this...
Health regeneration.
Yeah, and health regeneration. When you're near a primal, an allied primal. And the search radius is 12, so it's a pretty big search radius. I think this could genuinely be viable once, every Eventide game is a full Eventide game full of humans, and you can basically always run around with a primal. I think it could.
It has potential.
It has potential, but right now
overall its power level is quite low.
Yeah, and it's only good in Eventide. No other mode. It potentially good in Eventide, but yeah, it's just objectively one of the worst.
Another pretty mediocre passive that also has potential is Bracelet of the Firstborn. So while you're primal, you're going to heal enemies for damage that you deal. As primal, you're going to heal your nearby allies. I think it has potential, but it's not worth having no bonus while not primal. So it's useless unless you're primal. And I think the value add while primal is just not there. So I think overall it's one of the worst. Yeah, definitely one of the worst trinkets. The last one I will say is Wreckful Circuit.
Yes.
Where you gain move speed upon entering a bush. I think it is weird and not really worth it as a passive when there's better options out there, even though it can make you zoom around the map. I don't think it's quite worth it. Okay.
That's our meta discussion.
So we've talked about a bunch of individual items. What are the best builds? What's one of the best builds, would you say?
Honestly, probably be like a support build, in my opinion.
So what's a good support build?
A really good support build, I think, is the Facade and Exhortation Talisman, and then either Catalytic Heal or Catalytic Renewal, and then you can change your heavy weapon depending on which banner you choose. I think that it's super strong. I prefer Catalytic Renewal and then using the Heretic, and then you can have the impact of doing massive damage while also healing your team. And then the Infusion perk from the Facade is really good, and you're also slowing enemies.
You're going to slow enemies, you're going to mark enemies so your team heals off of them.
And you're also going to have it has a blast radius, so you can mark multiple enemies.
You're revealing enemies. It's a really good build.
It's a very strong, high impact build.
Okay, what's another very strong build? What if you want to get kills yourself?
If you want to get kills yourself, I like the Primal Eye personally, because you give your teammates Primal, you get a lot of Primal, and it has a lot of ammo if you're charging up every single one of your shots. And I think if you just use like a backup heavy weapon with it and like a blink.
What's a backup heavy weapon?
The Renegade or the Dispatch, I think, are both really good with it, because you can also utilize its range and get the sniper banner if necessary.
And then what's a good passive and ability to use with sniper?
Well, obviously the Bracer of Dedication.
So that's a sniper passive that's going to give you more damage.
Yeah. And then Primal Eye, Bracer of Dedication, either movement ability or Frost Bomb, and then just like Renegade or the Dispatch, I think is a very strong build.
Okay.
Yeah, a good like dive combat build would be like the Caretaker, Leap, Op Mandrill, and Clemency Vial. I think is very strong, very good, very strong.
You're gonna have a lot of sustain from full Vanguard. Clemency Vial keep you alive. You can dive on enemies and you can reset the cooldown with the Op Mandrill. Okay.
And then one more good build would probably swapping out the Caretaker for the Borson, and swapping out Clemency Vial for Belt of Phasing. And then you have massive health. You still have movement ability. You have the Op Mandrill.
That's more of a tanky build.
And you can still go in on people. And I think that build is also very strong.
Okay, sweet. So you heard it. Those are some of the best builds.
Yeah.
I think another honorable mention will be Coda Fusion Constant, which is the dual pistols combined with Power Infusion, gives you insane damage, and then you can use Clemency Vial to stay alive. And there's a couple options for heavy weapons, but I think that those kind of 3 items together are a really insane kind of dive or like burst down build. It has insane DPS, especially in Slayer.
Anyway, I hope you found today's video useful. Remember to comment down below to enter into the key giveaway. Remember to comment your Twitter username and have your DMs open so I can message you the code if you win. While you're down there, just hit that little subscribe button, hit that little like button, and share this to everyone in your contacts list. I'm sure at least one person will find it entertaining. Anyway, apart from that, I hope you have a good doodah day.